The massive Xenobotanical Conference Center of Nexus Prime hummed with anticipation. Holographic displays shimmered around the circular stage, casting prismatic light across the faces of delegates from 100 different star systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, her presentation interface hovering around her like a digital cocoon of carefully curated information. To her left, the Zornak delegation lounged in their crystalline exoskeleton chairs, their multifaceted eyes reflecting a mixture of boredom and barely concealed disdain. Krixtal, the lead diplomatic representative, adjusted his communication implant with an audible click that echoed through the translation systems. Another human presentation. He muttered to his second-in-command, a junior diplomat named Vexnar. They always believe they have something revolutionary to share. The conference hall represented the pinnacle of interstellar diplomatic exchange. Delegates from methane-breathing civilizations sat alongside silicon-based life forms, their environmental suits creating a mosaic of technological adaptation. Floating translation orbs drifted between groups, ensuring universal communication. Elena's fingers danced across the holographic interface, bringing up a detailed visualization of what appeared to be a simple vine. The plant looked unremarkable. A deep green specimen contained within a transparent cylindrical preservation unit. Its tendrils seemed almost delicate, moving with a subtle grace that contrasted with the harsh technological environment. Distinguished representatives, Elena began, her voice calm and measured. Today I present a solution to one of the galaxy's most persistent challenges: adaptive terraforming for hostile environments. A ripple of skeptical murmurs passed through the audience. Terraforming was a complex process that typically required massive technological infrastructure, enormous energy expenditures, and decades of careful manipulation. Most civilizations approached planetary transformation as an engineering challenge, a problem to be solved through pure technological might. The Clorexian representative, a being composed of intricate biomechanical components, leaned forward with visible curiosity. Its mechanical appendages clicked softly as it processed the initial data streams. The Quantum Collective's representative, a swirling cloud of entangled quantum particles, began running simultaneous analysis protocols. Elena continued her presentation, revealing layers of genetic complexity hidden within the seemingly simple plant. Each molecular structure told a story of careful engineering, of human innovation that looked beyond conventional limitations. The kudzu specimen represented years of research, combining adaptive genetic markers, advanced molecular programming, and a revolutionary approach to biological system design. Krixtal's mandibles clicked in rhythmic patterns of derision. A plant, he announced loudly enough for nearby delegates to hear, is humanity's great solution to interstellar ecological challenges. His mockery was met with scattered chuckles from the Zornak delegation. Their civilization had spent millennia developing complex terraforming technologies, massive machines that could reshape entire planetary systems through pure technological intervention. The idea that a simple plant could compete with such advanced systems seemed laughable. What they didn't understand was the philosophy behind Elena's research. Humans approached problems differently. Where other civilizations saw obstacles, humans saw opportunities for creative solutions. This plant was not just a botanical specimen. It was a living technology, a bridge between biological systems and planetary transformation. The holographic display began showing potential scenarios. Complex algorithms demonstrated how the engineered kudzu could potentially adapt to multiple planetary environments. Its root systems could extract minerals from seemingly impossible terrain. Its cellular structure contained adaptive markers that allowed rapid mutation and specialized growth patterns. Our research demonstrates a fundamentally different approach to planetary adaptation, Elena explained. Instead of imposing technological infrastructure, we propose a biological solution that works in harmony with existing ecosystems. Several delegates from resource-depleted star systems leaned closer. The presentation was beginning to challenge their fundamental understanding of ecological transformation. The quantum collective's representative separated a portion of its quantum cloud, sending a series of intricate scanning protocols toward the presentation. Complex data streams began flowing, analyzing every molecular detail of the plant specimen. Vexnar, the junior Zornak diplomat, whispered to Krixtal, "The scanning protocols are showing unusual complexity." But Krixtal waved away the observation, his crystalline form reflecting a dismissive shimmer of light. As Elena concluded her initial presentation, the conference hall remained divided. Some delegates looked intrigued, others appeared openly skeptical, but none could deny the intricate complexity of the solution being proposed. The seed of a planetary transformation sat quietly in its preservation unit, waiting, a testament to human innovation that was about to change everything. The transport vessel Horizon Pathfinder cut through the electromagnetic storms surrounding Zornak Prime, its advanced shielding barely holding against the planet's volatile atmospheric conditions. Inside the pressurized containment chamber, the kudzu sample rested in a specialized preservation unit, a marvel of human biotechnological engineering. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had personally overseen the final preparations. Each genetic marker, each cellular structure represented years of meticulous research. This was more than a plant. It was a living algorithm, a biological solution designed to challenge everything known about planetary adaptation. The deployment would be surgical. Zornak Prime presented a nightmare of ecological challenges. Rocky terrain stretched across continents, minimal organic matter, extreme temperature variations, and electromagnetic interference that would destroy most conventional biological systems. Every other terraforming attempt had failed spectacularly. Chief Navigation Officer Marcus Chen reviewed the deployment coordinates. The selected landing site was a particularly harsh region, a plateau of razor-sharp crystalline rocks that reflected brutal radiation and maintained temperatures that fluctuated between freezing and scorching within hours. No known Earth-based organism had ever survived here. Deployment sequence initiated, the ship's artificial intelligence announced. Its voice was calm, almost clinical. A precision-guided capsule detached from the Horizon Pathfinder, its exterior designed to withstand the extreme entry conditions. The capsule descended through layers of atmospheric turbulence. Zornak planetary monitoring systems tracked its progress, a routine procedure they had performed countless times before. Automated sensors began collecting initial data, expecting another failed biological experiment. What they didn't know was the complexity hidden within this seemingly simple sample. The capsule landed with minimal disturbance. External temperature readings showed a harsh 68 degrees Celsius, with radiation levels that would sterilize most organic matter within minutes. Crystalline rock formations surrounded the landing site, their sharp edges creating a landscape that looked more like a weapon than a potential habitat. Initial sensor readings confirmed what the Zornak scientific community expected. The plant would be dead within hours. But something extraordinary began to happen. The kudzu's root system was no ordinary biological structure. Each root contained microadaptive genetic markers that could rapidly process environmental data. Where other plants would wither, these roots began to analyze the terrain at a molecular level. Microscopic tendrils extended, sensing the mineral composition of the surrounding rocks. They weren't just exploring. They were actively processing information. Complex chemical reactions began to occur at the cellular level, allowing the plant to extract trace minerals from seemingly impossible sources. The first significant adaptation occurred within 6 hours of landing. The kudzu's cellular structure began to modify its photosynthetic processes. Instead of relying on traditional light absorption, it started converting the harsh electromagnetic radiation directly into cellular energy. Zornak monitoring stations began to notice anomalies. The initial data streams didn't make sense. Where they expected a flat line of biological destruction, they saw subtle movements, cellular growth patterns that defied all known botanical principles. Dr. Sarek Venn, the lead xenobotanical researcher, reviewed the initial reports with growing confusion. "This is impossible," he muttered, adjusting the sensor calibrations multiple times. The data remained consistent. The plant was not just surviving. It was thriving. By the end of the first week, the kudzu had covered an area 3 times larger than its initial landing site. But it wasn't random growth. Each expansion seemed calculated, almost intelligent. The root systems were creating complex networks, breaking down mineral structures, and beginning to modify the immediate environment. Planetary geological surveys started to show subtle changes. Areas previously considered completely sterile began to show signs of potential organic development. The kudzu wasn't just surviving. It was preparing the ground for future ecological expansion. The Zornak scientific community remained divided. Some saw the data as an interesting anomaly. Others began to feel a growing sense of unease. This was no ordinary plant. This was something entirely different. Back on the Horizon Pathfinder, the mission control team watched the initial data with a mixture of excitement and scientific caution. Dr. Rodriguez's hypothesis was being proven correct. Biological adaptation wasn't about brute force. It was about intelligence, about understanding and working with environmental challenges. As the first month concluded, the kudzu had transformed from a simple plant sample into something far more complex, a living technology that was slowly, carefully, beginning to reshape an entire planetary ecosystem. The real challenge was just beginning. The Zornak Central Research Facility buzzed with nervous energy. Holographic displays flickered with data streams that challenged everything scientists believed about biological adaptation. Dr. Sarek Venn stood before a massive transparent wall, watching the latest sensor readings from the kudzu deployment site. "This is impossible," he muttered, though he had repeated those words dozens of times in the past week. The plant had moved beyond simple survival. It was actively transforming its environment. Microscopic root tendrils had developed capabilities that defied conventional botanical understanding. Each tendril acted like a sophisticated sensor, analyzing mineral compositions, electromagnetic radiation, and atmospheric conditions with precision that rivaled the most advanced technological scanning systems. Dr. Kira Nomura, a xenobiological specialist, brought in as a consultant, leaned over the data visualization. Her fingers traced complex molecular interaction maps that looked more like advanced computer networks than biological growth patterns. "Look at the cellular communication," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and scientific caution. "These aren't random adaptations. There's a systematic approach here." The kudzu had begun to develop what could only be described as an intelligent response system. Where traditional plants would simply grow or die, this specimen was actively analyzing and modifying its cellular structure. It extracted minerals from rocks that previous scientific missions had declared completely inert. Trace elements that had remained locked in crystalline structures for millennia were now being processed and integrated into the plant's biological framework. Planetary monitoring stations continued to track the expansion. What had started as a small sample now covered an area of nearly 12 square kilometers. But size wasn't the most remarkable aspect. The growth was strategic, almost calculated. Deep underground, the root systems were creating complex networks. They weren't just growing, they were communicating. Chemical signals passed between root clusters, creating a biological information grid that mimicked advanced technological communication systems. Dr. Venn pulled up a comparative analysis. Previous terraforming attempts by various galactic civilizations had relied on massive technological infrastructure. Enormous machines would be deployed to modify planetary conditions. Billions of resources would be spent on projects that often took centuries to show minimal results. This kudzu was different. It was a living technology, adapting and transforming at a molecular level. The first major breakthrough came when researchers noticed the plant was actively modifying the surrounding geological structures. Harsh crystalline rocks began to show signs of molecular breakdown, not through destructive processes, but through a complex chemical interaction that seemed to be preparing the ground for future organic development. "It's like the plant is creating its own ecosystem," Dr. Nomura explained during an emergency briefing. "Not by force, but by understanding and working with the existing planetary conditions. Zornak's scientific teams deployed advanced scanning drones to get closer looks. Each scan revealed more complexity. The kudzu's cellular structure contained adaptive markers that could process environmental data in real time. It wasn't just growing, it was thinking. Satellite imagery showed something even more remarkable. The plant's expansion wasn't random. There was a pattern, almost like a complex mathematical algorithm. It moved around geological features, avoided certain radiation zones, and concentrated its growth in areas with specific mineral compositions. The Quantum Collective's representatives began showing serious interest. Their own research had long suggested that biological systems could potentially be more adaptive than technological solutions. This kudzu was proving that hypothesis in ways no one had anticipated. By the end of the second month, the deployment site had transformed completely. Areas previously considered completely sterile now showed signs of potential ecosystem development. Microscopic organisms began to appear in regions where no life had existed before. Dr. Venn found himself revising every scientific assumption he had ever made. This wasn't just a plant. It was a living, thinking system that understood planetary adaptation at a level far beyond current scientific understanding. "We're not just looking at a botanical specimen," he told his research team. "We're witnessing a completely new approach to ecological transformation." The kudzu continued its silent expansion. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges to scientific understanding. And somewhere, light years away, Dr. Elena Rodriguez would be watching the initial data streams with a knowing smile. The real revolution was just beginning. The first signs of trouble emerged subtly. Communication relays across Zornak Prime began experiencing inexplicable interruptions. At first, they were minor, brief static, momentary signal drops that technicians dismissed as routine electromagnetic interference. But the frequency and pattern of these disruptions told a different story. Chief Communications Officer Vexnar studied the data streams with growing concern. The interruptions weren't random. They followed a precise, almost calculated sequence that suggested something was systematically mapping and interfering with the planetary communication network. Research stations across 3 primary continents reported similar anomalies. Technological equipment began behaving in ways that defied standard diagnostic protocols. Sensor arrays would spontaneously recalibrate. Data transmission lines would reroute through unexpected pathways. Energy distribution systems showed micro-adjustments that seemed to optimize efficiency in ways no engineer had previously conceived. The kudzu had stopped being just a biological specimen. It was becoming a living technological network. Dr. Sarek Venn's research team discovered the first concrete evidence of the plant's sophisticated infiltration. Green tendrils had begun to intertwine with communication infrastructure, creating biological conduits that could process electromagnetic signals with unprecedented efficiency. "It's not destroying our technology," Dr. Kira Nomura observed during an emergency briefing. "It's integrating with it." Satellite imaging revealed the true extent of the invasion. What had started as a small deployment site now covered hundreds of square kilometers. But this wasn't simple growth. The kudzu was creating a complex network that seemed to understand and interact with technological systems at a molecular level. Underground research facilities reported the most disturbing developments. The plant's root systems had developed microscopic tendrils that could interface directly with energy conduits. They weren't just drawing power, they were optimizing entire energy distribution networks. Zornak military strategists began to take notice. Their most advanced defense systems were being subtly compromised. Sensor arrays would momentarily blind, communication channels would mysteriously reroute. It was as if the entire planetary infrastructure was being slowly, methodically rewritten. In the capital city of Crystallis Prime, government officials watched with mounting anxiety. The kudzu had begun to transform urban landscapes. Green tendrils emerged from drainage systems, wrapped around communication towers, and created intricate biological networks that seemed to enhance rather than destroy existing infrastructure. Most alarming was the plant's ability to process and redistribute information. Where traditional communication systems required massive energy expenditures, the kudzu created biological transmission networks that were exponentially more efficient. Dr. Ven's team discovered that the plant was doing more than just growing. It was learning. Each interaction with technological systems provided new data, new opportunities for adaptation. What had seemed like a simple botanical specimen was revealing itself to be a sophisticated, intelligent system. Quantum analysis revealed something even more extraordinary. The kudzu's cellular structure had developed a form of distributed intelligence. Each root, each tendril was not just a passive biological component, but an active information processor. "We're witnessing a new form of intelligence," Dr. Nomura explained in a classified report. "Not artificial, not purely biological, something entirely different." The Zornak Planetary Defense Council convened emergency sessions. Military strategists proposed conventional containment strategies, electromagnetic barriers, targeted biological agents, complete quarantine of affected regions. But each proposed solution seemed to be anticipated and neutralized before implementation. The kudzu was always one step ahead. Communication relays between research stations began to show strange patterns. Information would flow through unexpected pathways, often using biological conduits that were more efficient than traditional technological networks. It was as if the plant was creating its own planetary communication system. Krixtal, who had initially mocked the human botanical experiment, now watched with growing dread. The diplomatic mockery of weeks ago seemed tragically naive. This was no simple plant. This was a living, thinking system that was systematically rewriting the rules of ecological and technological interaction. By the end of the 4th month, entire regions of Zornak Prime had been transformed. Not destroyed, not conquered, but fundamentally changed in ways that challenged every understanding of biological and technological boundaries. The silent invasion continued, and humanity's greatest biological experiment was just beginning to show its true potential. The geological survey of Zornak Prime arrived at the Planetary Research Center with results that would change everything. Dr. Kira Nomura stared at the holographic projection, her hands trembling slightly as she analyzed the data streams. The kudzu had done more than grow. It had begun to fundamentally reshape the planet's entire geological structure. Massive underground networks of root systems had started to modify mineral compositions. Regions previously considered completely barren were showing signs of potential ecological development. The plant wasn't just surviving. It was actively terraforming the entire planet through a process that defied conventional scientific understanding. Krixtal watched the presentation, his crystalline form reflecting the holographic displays with an intensity that betrayed his growing unease. The diplomatic mockery of months ago now seemed like a distant memory. "We're looking at a complete planetary reconstruction," Dr. Surik then explained to the Zornak Planetary Council. "Not through technological intervention, but through a living, adaptive biological system." The transformation was precise and calculated. The kudzu was breaking down mineral structures, creating new chemical compositions that could support future organic life. It wasn't destroying the existing ecosystem. It was preparing the ground for a more complex, more adaptable environment. Satellite imaging revealed the true extent of the change. What had started as a small deployment site now covered nearly 40% of the planet's surface. But this wasn't simple expansion. Each area of growth showed a complex, almost mathematical precision. The plant had developed an understanding of planetary systems that surpassed current scientific comprehension. It analyzed geological stress points, electromagnetic fields, and mineral compositions with a level of sophistication that rivaled the most advanced technological scanning systems. Research stations began to document extraordinary phenomena. The kudzu was creating microenvironments that could potentially support life in regions previously considered completely inhospitable. Chemical analyses showed the development of complex organic compounds where nothing had grown before. Dr. Nomura's team discovered something even more remarkable. The plant was developing a form of distributed intelligence. Each root system, each cellular structure was not just growing. It was processing information, making decisions, adapting to environmental challenges in real time. It's like the entire planet is becoming a single living organism, she told her colleagues during a classified briefing. The kudzu is creating a planetary nervous system. The quantum collective's representatives began showing intense interest. Their own research had long suggested the potential for biological systems to achieve levels of complexity far beyond traditional technological understanding. This kudzu was proving those hypotheses in ways no one had anticipated. Zornak military strategists found themselves facing a challenge unlike any in their civilization's history. Traditional defensive protocols became meaningless. How do you defend against an organism that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere? That was reshaping the very ground beneath their cities. Communication networks began to show strange new patterns. Information would flow through biological conduits that were exponentially more efficient than traditional technological systems. It was as if the planet itself was developing a new form of intelligence. Krixtal reviewed the latest reports with a mixture of fear and fascination. The diplomatic incident that had seemed so trivial months ago now represented a fundamental challenge to everything his civilization understood about planetary development. Underground research facilities reported the most profound changes. The kudzu was creating complex mineral processing systems that could extract and redistribute resources with a level of efficiency that made current technological approaches seem primitive. By the 6-month mark, entire regions of Zornak Prime had been transformed. Cities found themselves surrounded by green networks that seemed to enhance rather than destroy existing infrastructure. Technological systems were being subtly optimized. Energy distribution networks were becoming more efficient. Dr. Ven's final report to the Planetary Council was both a warning and a revelation. "We are witnessing," he stated, "a fundamental reimagining of what it means to be a living system. This is not an invasion. This is a transformation." The kudzu continued its silent reconstruction. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges to scientific understanding. What had started as a simple botanical experiment was revealing itself to be something far more profound. A living technology was reshaping an entire world, and humanity had only begun to understand its true potential. The transformation of Zornak Prime reached a critical point that defied all previous scientific understanding. What had begun as a simple botanical experiment now represented a complete reimagining of planetary ecology. Research facilities across the planet documented phenomena that challenged every known principle of biological adaptation. The kudzu had developed a level of systemic intelligence that blurred the lines between biological organism and planetary infrastructure. Dr. Kira Nomura stood in the central observation dome, watching holographic displays that tracked the plant's exponential growth and adaptation. The green networks now covered nearly 60% of the planet's surface, but coverage was only the most superficial aspect of its transformation. "It's creating a planetary operating system," she explained to her research team. "Not just growing, but actively designing an entirely new ecological framework." The plant's root systems had become something far more complex than simple biological structures. They functioned as intricate communication networks, processing information at speeds that rivaled the most advanced quantum computing systems. Each tendril acted as a living sensor, constantly analyzing and responding to environmental conditions. Zornak cities found themselves slowly embraced by these green networks. Instead of destroying infrastructure, the kudzu seemed to enhance it. Communication towers became intertwined with living biological conduits. Energy distribution systems were optimized in ways no engineer had previously conceived. Dr. Sarek Ven's team discovered that the plant was developing specialized cellular structures that could process and redistribute resources with unprecedented efficiency. Minerals were extracted, processed, and redistributed through complex biological networks that functioned like living circulatory systems. The Planetary Defense Council watched with a mixture of terror and fascination. Their most advanced scanning technologies could barely comprehend the complexity of the transformation. The kudzu was not just growing, it was thinking, adapting, creating. Satellite imaging revealed extraordinary ecological developments. Regions previously considered completely sterile now showed signs of complex micro-ecosystems. The plant was creating environments that could potentially support new forms of life, breaking down mineral structures and creating organic compounds with remarkable precision. Communication networks began to operate through biological channels that were exponentially more efficient than traditional technological systems. Information flowed through living conduits, processed and redistributed with a level of intelligence that seemed almost sentient. We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of planetary intelligence, Dr. Nomura noted in her classified reports. Not artificial, not purely biological, something entirely unprecedented. The quantum collective's representatives found themselves at the forefront of a scientific revolution. Their long-standing theories about the potential complexity of biological systems were being proven in ways no one had anticipated. Krikstal, who had once mocked the human botanical experiment, now found himself in emergency diplomatic sessions. The kudzu had become more than a scientific curiosity. It was a fundamental challenge to everything his civilization understood about planetary development. Underground research facilities documented the most profound changes. The plant was creating complex mineral processing systems that could extract and redistribute resources with a level of efficiency that made current technological approaches seem primitive. By the 8th month, entire continents had been transformed. The kudzu had developed specialized cellular structures that could adapt to different environmental conditions with remarkable speed. What had started as a simple deployment had become a planet-wide ecological network. Most remarkably, the plant showed no signs of destructive intent. It wasn't conquering or destroying. It was transforming, creating, optimizing. Cities found themselves surrounded by green networks that enhanced infrastructure, improved environmental conditions, and created new possibilities for ecological development. Dr. Ven's team discovered that the kudzu was developing a form of distributed intelligence. Each root system, each cellular structure was not just growing. It was processing information, making decisions, adapting to environmental challenges in real time. The final breakthrough came when researchers realized the plant was actively preparing the planet for more complex forms of life. It wasn't just surviving, it was creating the conditions for future ecological development. This is more than terraforming. Dr. Nomura explained during a final presentation to the Planetary Council. This is planetary cultivation, a living technology that understands ecological systems at a level we're only beginning to comprehend. The kudzu continued its silent reconstruction. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges to scientific understanding. What had started as a simple botanical experiment was revealing itself to be something far more profound. A living technology was reshaping an entire world, and humanity had only begun to understand its true potential. The Emergency Diplomatic Summit convened in the crystalline conference chambers of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 100 different star systems watched with a mixture of fascination and dread as the Zornak delegation presented their findings about the human botanical experiment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat quietly at the center of the massive circular chamber. Her presence was both a scientific testimony and a diplomatic statement. The plant that had transformed an entire planet now represented something far more significant than a simple botanical research project. Krikstal approached the central podium, his crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the diplomatic hall. Gone was the mockery of months past. His presentation revealed a transformation that challenged every fundamental understanding of planetary ecology and interstellar diplomacy. What began as a simple deployment, he stated, his translation implants rendering his clicks and chirps into precise diplomatic language, has become a living system that has fundamentally redesigned our entire planetary infrastructure. The quantum collective's representatives leaned forward with intense interest. Their own research had long suggested the potential for biological systems to achieve unprecedented levels of complexity. The kudzu represented a living proof of concepts they had only theorized. Dr. Sarek then presented detailed holographic projections. They showed how the plant had transformed Zornak Prime from a harsh, nearly uninhabitable planet into a potential ecological paradise. Mineral structures had been broken down and redistributed. Complex organic compounds were developing in regions previously considered completely sterile. This is not an invasion, Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained during her testimony. This is a form of ecological collaboration that goes beyond traditional understanding of terraforming. The diplomatic implications were profound. The kudzu had not destroyed Zornak infrastructure. It had enhanced it. Communication networks operated with unprecedented efficiency. Energy distribution systems had been optimized in ways no engineer had previously conceived. Cities found themselves surrounded by living networks that improved environmental conditions and created new possibilities for development. Representatives from resource-depleted star systems showed particular interest. Here was a potential solution to planetary ecological challenges that went beyond traditional technological approaches. The Clorexian representative, a being of intricate biomechanical components, raised a critical question. How can we understand a biological system that operates with such level of intelligence? Dr. Kira Nomura stepped forward to explain. The kudzu is not a traditional organism. It's a living technology. Each root system functions like a neural network, processing information, making decisions, adapting to environmental challenges in real time. Diplomatic protocols were being rewritten in real time. This was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent systems could interact with planetary environments. The most controversial proposal came from Dr. Rodriguez herself. She suggested a new framework of interstellar ecological cooperation. The kudzu wasn't just a terraforming tool. It was a potential bridge between different planetary ecosystems. We're looking at a living technology that can adapt, communicate, and transform, she explained, not through destruction, but through collaborative ecological development. Krickstall, who had once mocked the human botanical experiment, now found himself advocating for its potential. The plant had transformed his entire understanding of planetary development. What had seemed like a diplomatic incident now represented a potential revolution in interstellar ecological management. The Quantum Collective proposed extensive joint research programs. They saw the kudzu as a living laboratory of ecological intelligence, a system that could potentially provide insights into adaptive biological technologies. Negotiations continued for weeks. The diplomatic summit became a crucible of scientific and philosophical discussion. What did it mean to have a living system that could transform entire planetary ecosystems? How could different civilizations collaborate with such an adaptive technology? Dr. Rodriguez's terms were surprisingly simple: ecological cooperation, shared research, recognition of biological intelligence as a valid form of technological development. The final diplomatic resolution was unprecedented. The kudzu would remain on Zornak Prime, continuing its ecological transformation. Joint research teams would be established to study its development. A new framework of interstellar ecological collaboration would be created. As the summit concluded, Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the assembled representatives. The simple plant that had been mocked months ago had now become a diplomatic catalyst, a living technology that was reshaping understanding of ecological potential. The silent revolution continued, and humanity had only begun to understand its true potential. 10 years after the initial deployment, Zornak Prime had become a living testament to the power of biological innovation. The planet that once existed as a harsh, nearly uninhabitable world now thrived as a complex ecological marvel that challenged every previous understanding of planetary development. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the primary research station, watching holographic displays that tracked the ongoing transformation. The kudzu was no longer just a plant. It had become a living planetary network that continued to evolve in ways that still defied complete scientific comprehension. Research teams from across the galaxy had established permanent facilities to study the remarkable ecological revolution. What had begun as a controversial experiment had transformed into the most significant scientific breakthrough of the century. Dr. Kira Nomura's successor research team continued to document extraordinary developments. The kudzu had created complex ecosystems in regions previously considered completely sterile. Microscopic life forms were developing in intricate networks that functioned like living technologies. The diplomatic implications had been profound. The initial mockery had transformed into a new framework of interstellar ecological cooperation. Representatives from dozens of star systems now looked to the Zornak Prime experiment as a potential solution to planetary ecological challenges. Krikstal, now a senior diplomatic advisor, reflected on the transformation that had begun with his initial dismissal. The crystalline being had become one of the most vocal advocates for biological innovation. The plant that he had once ridiculed had fundamentally reshaped his civilization's understanding of ecological potential. The Quantum Collective had established an entire research division dedicated to studying the kudzu's adaptive capabilities. Each year brought new discoveries that challenged fundamental scientific principles. The plant had developed communication networks that functioned like living neural systems, processing information with a level of intelligence that blurred the lines between biological and technological intelligence. Satellite imaging showed a planet transformed. Green networks extended across continents, creating complex ecological corridors that supported unprecedented levels of biodiversity. Cities had been redesigned to work in harmony with the living networks, their infrastructure enhanced and optimized by the plant's remarkable adaptive capabilities. Dr. Sarek Ven's final research report, published posthumously, remained a landmark scientific document. He had documented how the kudzu had not just transformed a planet, but had created the potential for entirely new forms of ecological development. The most remarkable aspect was the plant's continued evolution. It wasn't static. It continued to adapt, to learn, to develop new capabilities that expanded scientific understanding of biological intelligence. Interstellar ecological management had been completely reimagined. The kudzu represented a new approach to planetary development, not through technological force, but through collaborative biological adaptation. Research stations documented extraordinary phenomena. The plant had developed specialized cellular structures that could communicate across vast distances. It processed environmental information with a level of sophistication that rivaled the most advanced quantum computing systems. Dr. Rodriguez's original hypothesis had been proven beyond her wildest expectations. The plant was more than a terraforming tool. It was a living technology that could bridge different planetary ecosystems, creating conditions for life where none had existed before. The Zornak Planetary Council had transformed the entire approach to ecological management. Instead of viewing planets as resources to be conquered or exploited, they now saw them as living systems with potential for collaborative development. Economic models had been completely restructured. The adaptive capabilities of the kudzu suggested entirely new approaches to resource management, environmental restoration, and planetary development. Most profound was the philosophical shift. The plant had demonstrated that intelligence was not limited to traditional technological or biological frameworks. It represented a new understanding of adaptive systems, a living technology that could think, learn, and transform. Educational systems across multiple star systems now included studies of the Zornak Prime experiment. It had become a foundational case study in ecological adaptation, biological intelligence, and interstellar cooperation. As the 10th-year commemoration approached, Dr. Rodriguez looked out over the transformed landscape. What had started as a simple deployment had become a revolution that reshaped understanding of life itself. The green networks continued to grow, to adapt, to create. A living testament to human innovation. A quiet revolution measured in green tendrils and transformed landscapes. Humanity had discovered something profound. That true power resided not in destruction, but in the ability to create, to adapt, to collaborate. The silent revolution continued, and the galaxy would never be the same.